You're listening to a Monster Kid podcast.
And welcome to A Dingo Ate My Movie, a podcast that features classic Ozploitation and other weird, wonderful, overlooked and underappreciated Australian films from the 70s, 80s and beyond. My name is Pete and I'm your host.
The Night Rider. That is his name. The Night Rider. Remember him when you look at the night sky.
Welcome to Dingo Ate My Movie. I'd like to start today by expressing my gratitude to everyone that's contacted me during the recent health concerns I've been having. I really appreciate your concern and your support, and I'm glad to report that surgery's been as successful as it can be, and I'm recovering pretty well at the moment. I also want to thank everyone that's been patiently listening to older episodes of the podcast while I've been unable to record new ones. I can still see a lot of activity there, so it's great to see. Thank you very much for that. I'd really hoped to release another episode before the end of this year, but unfortunately I was unable to sort of get everything lined up in time, and that's what happens. However, I still wanted to provide something for you to listen to, so I hope this shorter episode will suffice until I can release a full episode in the new year, which is going to be Dead Kids or Strange Behaviour, whatever it's called, but it's a fun movie. Really looking forward to that one with Micah. Anyway, on to today's episode. Earlier this year I had the pleasure of talking with Brian Trenchard-Smith, a film director, producer and screenwriter known for his work in the action and especially the Ozploitation genre. With a career spanning over 4 decades, Brian has left a lasting impact on the film industry with his unique and innovative approach to storytelling. Unfortunately, we experienced some technical issues during the interview, and we are only able to present the latter half of the conversation we had. Despite these challenges, I was able to have a fascinating and enlightening discussion with Brian, who shared insights on his career and the film industry as a whole. I hope you enjoyed this glimpse into the mind of a talented and, frankly, great filmmaker. I'm very grateful to Brian for his willingness to work with me through the technical difficulties we encountered while recording. I hope to have a chance to speak with him again if he'll have me in the future, and I'll definitely make sure to avoid any similar issues. Thank you very much, Brian, for your time and patience. Very appreciated. So, please sit back, relax, and join us as we chat with Brian Trenchard-Smith on A Dingo Ate My Movie. Yes, in the era of Ozploitation films, besides your own films, because I'm sure you love all your own films, everyone does, right? What are some of your other favourite films? I think you mentioned Philip Mora before, some films from that sort of that 10BA era. What are some of your favourites?
Well, actually, really all of Bruce Beresford's early films are really very interesting to watch. And of course, they don't well, I suppose you could say that Money Movers was Ozploitation, but I think it was just a tough crime robbery picture, Thieves Fall Out and so forth, done to take advantage of the new R rating, where you could cut people's toes off with bolt cutters and things like that. And you could use exploding blood bags. He slowly built suspense for a really good robbery picture. I think that film is still interesting to watch today because it feels so real. And though maybe it would be I haven't watched it in many years. I made the trailer for it, and as I did for many of the films of that era. So let me think of other things. Next of Kin, I thought, was a really good little horror film with some really imaginative. Should have had a much better run than that. Should have been championed. There was a time in the 80s when Australian critics got tired of Australian films and having to see too many of them, and were constantly measuring them against the standard of Hollywood films. And indeed, the consumer deserves the highest standards. Doesn't matter, nationality should only count for so much. But these are expressions of Australian culture, even using international genres. So I think I'm trying to think of other particular films that I liked. I liked Philippe Mora's Death of a Soldier. I thought that was, it's docudrama, and the obvious injustice of that he was depicted in the story, I think, came across very well. All the early Australian films I really liked, and I'm trying to think of another Ozploitation film, but obviously I liked Richard Franklin's Patrick, and obviously Road Games, which gave him a brief American career, it was. It just, I'm glad that the government put as much money as they did into Australian films from 1970, through into the 80s. There are those that say that it was a waste of money. I don't agree. I think it created an international, base for filmmakers to come from other parts of the world and make a TV series, make movies, as well as for Australia to make its own films about its own culture, and so the necessary infrastructure took really a generation to build, and that was taxpayers' money well spent, because now Australia, which didn't have its own film industry and was an occasional backlot in the 50s and the 60s, became a viable production centre from the 70s onwards, and many Australians have gone on to illustrious careers, winning Oscars for cinematography and so forth. The film industry as such was a champion for tourism. I think up till once Australian films started to be made, obviously the first few were screened at embassies across the world and things like that, and it created a greater awareness within, let's say, the diplomatic and political class of Australia as a society. And there were things like Sunday Too Far Away, about the Ken Hanham's film about the shearers' strike, and those early social document films were very useful in broadening the world's understanding of Australia. Then Ozploitation kind of took root when people like me wanted to put some of our lurid aspects of our imagination on the screen, and do it in a stronger form than had been allowed before in Australia. But what those films did was to show the pictorial beauty of Australia to the world, and what an attractive place it was, with modern, bustling cities right by the sea, and people eating good food and playing sports, and wow, this is Europe in a hot climate. And I believe that the output of Australian films and television from 1970 onwards was a boon to Australian tourism, and I cite BMX Bandits for really making a lot of British people in the rainy north wanting to somehow come to Australia. That's the place to have the holiday we save up for. So I think BMX Bandits, Man from Hong Kong in 75 showed Sydney Harbour as most audiences in regular cinemas, in France, Germany, Spain, Italy, they hadn't, aerials of Sydney Harbour with a hang glider cruising over them and a penthouse blowing up. They hadn't, and the Opera House, we had a big scene at the Opera House. They hadn't seen that, and Australia looked good. Apart from all the mayhem that was happening in the streets, but never mind that. That's what Man from Hong Kong is meant to give you. But you also got landscapes, and you also got a view of Australia that is, it's a spectacular place, and that harbour is spectacular. So, I am exaggerating my contribution to tourism, of course, but many filmmakers for decades showed what a great looking place and Australia is, and probably it could well be to live in. So
speaking of lurid movies and things like that you were mentioning before, I've read a couple of articles. I think you forwarded me one of your articles from your blog the other day around Hitchcock and how he sort of took what could be shown in a movie and took it right to the limit, and sort of with censorship, etc. And you certainly pushed that envelope with Turkey Shoot, right? So did you have any issues with censors at the time, with censorship at the time of release of Turkey Shoot? Like, I was only having a look at it again last night and looking at is that character's name Alpha eating a toe of somebody and all this sort of stuff. So did you have any sort of run-ins that way?
Yes, there were some countries that banned Turkey Shoot. Norway, Sweden, Scandinavia, they were kind of sensitive about such things, and as toe eating and the various the beating scene on the parade ground. That's several minutes in, and I guess if you can survive that scene, then you're ready for the rest of the film. But it's a very important scene, and the British censor wanted to make lots of cuts all over the film, but I wrote a letter, which I wish I could find somewhere buried deep in the files of pre-digital files, in which I defended some of the scenes and shots that he wanted to take out, and he relaxed in a few of them. Anyway, so naturally, in all countries that ban nudity, such as Asia and India, naturally in the film, as in several of my films, were cut if there was any love making. Of course, in South Africa, the interracial love scenes were cut because that was in the apartheid era, and can't have that sort of thing going on South African screens. Thank you very much. But all of that, I hope, has changed. Well, I believe it has.
The other thing I wanted to quickly mention is music in your films. So I'm a musician. I've been a musician for a long time, and I always take a fair bit of interest in music. And the music in your films is always really on point. So if I think about things like, Man from Hong Kong had a really great soundtrack, and you had that great song by British Jigsaw, Sky High, and then the other thing that really grabs me is when I look at Dead End Drive-In, and we have that intro with the Machinations song as that movie's all starting off. And I think a lot of your films really use music well. So is that something that you have in mind when you're in pre-production and when you're writing scripts, etc., or is it something that sort of just works its way in as you're producing the film?
Well, I think it's common to a lot of filmmakers that we use listening to music, film music, classical music, the latest pop, the latest ambient, whatever is our taste, whatever we feel will inspire us. That's quite often playing in the background while I'm working on written material. And so I approach a film thinking of the music going in. And this is an approach that Quentin Tarantino has used always when he comes up with an idea for a film, and then he goes into his vinyl music library and finds tracks that speak to him in some way about that film or about a sequence in that film, and that is certainly how he came up with the score for Pulp Fiction. Sergio Leone, I know because when I made the trailer for Once Upon a Time in the West, he would have some pre-recorded tracks that he would play on the set to set the mood for the actors. So when Claudia Cardinale and Charles Bronson are having their various scenes together, prior to shooting the scenes, Leone would play this, the love theme, basically, before it had been fully recorded with an orchestra, but had been done electronically by Morricone. This would set the mood for the actors in the scene, and I thought that's very helpful. Actors need all the help they can get, and if that works for them, and I think it certainly worked for Claudia Cardinale and Charles Bronson and Jason Robards. And I told this to Peter Weir when he and I and his producers went to the reissue of The Good and the Bad and the Ugly for back in Australia after the R rating had restored all its original cuts, and he'd never seen it. He'd never seen Fistful of Dollars or For a Few Dollars More, because those looked like exploitation, bad Italian dubbed westerns, and that was he was going to waste his time seeing those. But I said, you've got to see this film, and you've got to see Leone's style. And so we all went to it, and then I told him what I had learned in my trailer making time at National Screen, that this is what Leone did. And I do believe that Peter has adopted that, or did adopt that, on a couple of his films, and played some sample tracks ahead of time on the set, getting people to in the mood. I haven't spoken to Peter for years and years, but great filmmaker. Hey, Cars That Ate Paris, an early Ozploitation film. Of course, and The Last Wave is a great movie as well. Yes, I made the trailer for that too. So music is important to filmmakers. The sound brings the visual image to life, and there are all sorts of different ways you can bring that image to life with music, with sound effects, or sometimes with unexpected silence. I'm going to talk a little bit about your book. I'm interested to know, and this is one of the reasons I got you on here, because I wanted to, have a quick conversation with you. The book is fantastic. I've read it recently. I just started reading it again, just to go through it again. To me, it's essentially sort of part autobiography, part movie making textbook. It's a really good read. When did you get the idea to actually write the book, and how long did it take you to work on? Well, I suppose it took the better part of, really, from the first moment I decided to put pen to paper, 20 months. I would snack at it. Sometimes I'd have an intense couple of days at it, and then I'd let it be. And I would just, I wanted to use, my vanity in terms of saying, look at me, look at my life, which, I was very lucky to have the career that I had. But if I was going to do that, I wanted it to be instructive and hopefully as laden with humor that would make my vanity bearable. I want to encourage those who want to enter the gladiatorial arena of recorded entertainment. I want to provide them with a now dated object lesson in how to keep moving forward, how to keep trying to get better opportunities. What pitfalls to avoid, pitfalls I fell into, and maybe you see that pitfall, you think, oh, I was tempted to do that tomorrow. I won't do that. So that's putting it in simplistic terms. But so I wanted, let's say, the book to have some redeeming purpose other than just to say, look at me, look at me. I've had a very lucky life, and I have a wonderful wife who's put up with all my foibles. Is very gifted in her own right as a historian, but I think, I think this is an interesting story. Not many people have lives like this. Not many people are that lucky.
I think you've made so many films that have been so great and really enjoyable, and today we've really only scratched the surface, right? Like, I had notes for asking you about how you got involved with things like Leprechaun and Night of the Demons and things like that are kind of like a culty sort of films. But
well, everyone can, if they read the book, they can see what all 41 films and the 12 television series I've been involved with in some way, related. And with lessons learned and amusements that were had. It got very nice reviews before Amazon took it off, and I think some of those reviews have been restored now. But I took what happened with Amazon as actually an encouragement to go to do what I probably should have done in the first place, which was get a hardcover copy out, but I decided not to do that because of the cost, and I felt that that's the physical cost of doing everything in color just might be beyond the regular consumer. But I've decided that there might be collectors who, particularly if they have an autographed copy, be prepared to pay what it costs. My principal reason for the hardcover was to make it more attractive to libraries and universities and film schools to put in their literature section, because the level of enthusiasm for it in the reviews would indicate that any library that stocked it the book would be read by people interested in media studies. And so I think it's a worthy addition to any university's shelf, and they're more inclined to buy hardcover than paperback. And I think if you're going to put it out in hardcover, you've got to put it out in color. And I got the proof copy this morning, and I looked through it, and it all looks tremendous and hefty and colorful, as such things should when you're writing about movies. So I encourage people to buy it. You'll probably get sticker shock when you go to an Australian shop and try and order the hardcover. But if you're a university, you can afford it. But anyway, we'll see what people think. But I mean, unfortunately, it will retail at $60 in the US. I make $6 out of that. And I think I deserve $6 for given the work that I have put into it, and as a proportion of how the pie is cut up. I think I deserve 10%. So agents get 10%. I don't have an agent, happily. The paperback is about so you convert that to Australian price. Then that's worse.
About $100 or so. Yeah.
oh God, I'm not worth $100, really. I would have hoped 70.
You know what? For the information you've got in that book, it's definitely worth $100. And for the enjoyment I got from it, and I only read it on Kindle, right? So I definitely need to go out and get a copy of the book. So I'll definitely be doing that for sure.
Get a GoFundMe campaign going with your readership, and they will buy you the book.
Yeah.
And that's good because
that's it. Well, they can always support me on buymeacoffee.com. Thank you so much for coming on, Brian, and
my pleasure.
I look forward to reading your book again and getting.
That's right. Keep reading it, and eventually you'll know it by heart. Then you can do the audiobook. Okay.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode. Thank you to all my guests who give their time to make this podcast possible, and a special thanks to you for listening. Don't forget you can follow A Dingo Ate My Movie on social media. We're a Dingo Movie on Twitter, Dingo Movie Pod on Facebook and Instagram, and we're on the web at dingomoviepod.com. If you'd like to support the show, leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, or share the show with your friends. Of course, you can always buy me a coffee over at buymeacoffee.com/dingomoviepod. Once again, thanks for listening, stay safe, and I'll see you on the next episode of A Dingo Ate My Movie.